Great. I think we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for joining us today. Very excited for the speakers who are going to be presenting. I have a couple housekeeping notes to kick things off with. To the next slide here. Firstly, just wanted to remind you that this is part of a ongoing virtual workshop series. We've had two presentations already. This is the third, and two are left upcoming this fall. So I hope that you will join us for those. We'll put the registration link in the Zoom chat. And we have also recorded past workshops, so you can revisit those, or if you were unable to attend, check those out at your leisure. And just as a reminder, this workshop is put on by the Recruitment and Retention Resource Center here, part of ICTR, which is comprised of Ali Molnar and myself. And we are here to support you with any recruitment or retention planning or troubleshooting needs that you may have. We provide the services shown here. I won't read through them all, but we would really like to connect with you if you are looking for any assistance or resources relating to recruitment and retention. So please reach out. We'll put a link to our consult request form in the Zoom chat, or you can also email us any questions you have or just anything you want assistance with. Happy to help. A couple notes for today's call. Again, thank you for joining us on your lunch break. Glad that you're here. We do encourage questions, and the speakers have said they're very happy to answer questions at any time. So if you'd like to interject or put questions right in the Zoom chat, we would love for this to be interactive. So please, pose any questions to the speakers you have. We are recording the session, and we will share out a link afterwards, along with a summary of any Q&A that happens, and also a link to a very short evaluation survey. Please do fill out the survey. There's a spot there to note any other topics that you would like us to cover in additional workshops. And Ali and I would love to know what you were looking for. So take the time to fill out that 5-question survey, please. Please do make sure, again, as I said, questions are welcome. We just want to make sure that the questions would not reveal any confidential information about participants or details that could help identify them. And then finally, if you have any questions stemming from today's presentation about what you can or cannot say to study participants, we would encourage you to reach out to your IRB reviewer. They can best speak to such questions. And I will turn it over to Ali, who's going to introduce our speakers.
Hello, everyone. Oh, sorry, my Zoom froze. So I want to introduce our speakers today. We have Alison and Clark. They are both in the Department of Emergency Medicine, working with Dr. Gilmore-Bykowski. So first, Alison is a research program coordinator in the cognitive care lab. So Alison has been leading the lucidity and dementia study for over 3 years, managing recruitment, enrollment, and ongoing engagement with hospice patients living with dementia, their care partners, and clinical staff. Alison is also a registered nurse practicing hospice care. And then Clark is a researcher in the same lab. Clark has a master's of public affairs. And then Clark's research interests center around understanding the impact of public policy on cognitively vulnerable populations that in settings and contexts that frequently receive little attention. Clark has over 6 years of experience leading studies that engage directly with people living with dementia and their caregivers. So we are really excited for both of our presenters to be here today. So we will let you share your screen and get going.
Wonderful. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. And thank you all for attending today. It's a great turnout. It's great to see some familiar faces in the Zoom, and as well as some new faces. And actually, the new faces probably will get a lot more out of this because the old names might be a little tired of us talking about it. So yeah, we're just gonna start with a little bit of a background of our lab and kind of what it is that we're doing with the lab. We are the Cognitive Care Collaborative in the Department of Emergency Medicine, led by Dr. Andrea Gilmore-Bykowski. Dr. Gilmore-Bykowski is a nurse scientist, and a lot of the nursing values bleed into the values of our lab. We're very committed to promoting effective, meaningful, and equitable care and research for people living with and affected by Alzheimer's disease and related dementia. The main way that we are advancing this is by investigating care utilization and research disparities for people living with and at risk for dementia and their care partners. As Ali mentioned, much of our work involves partnering directly with people living with dementia and their care partners, mostly through qualitative research. There is also a lot of other engagement opportunities we try to do, such as a brain and body fitness program. We love working with this population, so we try to do it beyond research. But essentially, the purpose of this presentation is to share what works well when we're communicating with the research participants. Um, as kind of a framing for this presentation, a lot of the stuff that Allison and I are going to be talking about is around this idea of centering our participants in our research. We know that as researchers, there's a lot of different polls, a lot of different priorities, values, things that people are telling you to do, whether it's your funders, whatever it is, that there's a lot going on. But when you're doing human subjects research, the humans are really at the center, should be at the center of your decisions, and making the research work well for the participants is going to help you verbally connect with the participants. It's just going to make every step of the process much more um, much more improved and much more enjoyable for both you and the participants. So when you're thinking of all these different parts like consent, recruitment, data analysis, risks, benefits, data collection, just try to keep the participants at the center of those ideas. And Beth a couple weeks ago gave a talk here. Her recording is online. Did a great job explaining the consent process and the teach back method, which we try to utilize a lot. And I really recommend you go back and watch hers if you didn't already get the chance to, because it was very valuable, and I think it's a really key component of centering participants and making sure that that the research makes sense for the participant. So this is just a small roadmap for our discussion. Allison and I are going to go through two study examples. I'm going to go through the first, which is titled Tailoring Research Recruitment for Acute Care Settings. I'm going to talk about some strategies we used to create this study and make it participant-centered. So kind of like, how did we figure out the process for the study? And then I'm going to show you basically the end product for the project with this video that outlines some best practices for recruitment. And then I'm going to hand it over to Allison. Allison is going to uh, talk about her study, Lucidity and Dementia, an observational study. She's going to go over some study design considerations, mostly like flexible design considerations that can make it easier for participants to participate in research, and then going over a more practical example called the validation method or therapeutic communication. Some of you might be familiar with this already. I think it's a super valuable tool to engage and communicate with participants. So hopefully you all can find some value in that as we have. So yeah, I'm gonna just get started with the first study example. The full title is Tailoring Research Recruitment for Acute Care Settings, Recommendations for People with Dementia and Their Caregivers. The main idea with this study is that recruiting people living with dementia into research is already challenging enough. Oftentimes we assume that people living with dementia don't have the capacity to consent to research. So then we kind of just try to, we leave them out of a lot of studies, particularly studies that aren't focused on people living with dementia. If people have cognitive impairment, we leave them out. Um, but also, when we do recruit people living with dementia, it's often at parts that are easier to get them at settings that are easier to recruit them at, such as outpatient settings. We tend to avoid these acute care environments, such as the hospital or the emergency room, because we also kind of have these assumptions that um, for a number of reasons, I should say. But for one reason is that we think that, they're getting really critical care. They don't have time to participate in research, or like be asked to participate in research, especially if they have dementia. But people living with dementia really use the emergency department a lot. Over 50% of people living with dementia will visit the emergency room every year. So we really want to try to figure out ways that we can approach and recruit people living with dementia in these settings in a way that works for them. So what we did with this study is did qualitative interviews with people living with dementia and their care partners, uh, essentially examining what works well when recruiting them, what their preferences, recommendations are for recruiting them in this setting. We asked these kinds of questions below about what do you think might encourage others to be a part of the study? What do you think is important about participating in research? And when you're in the hospital, how do you want researchers to approach you? Um, so these were some of the strategies we used throughout the study to create a participant-centered study design. And this kind of starts at like what was easily done versus what was maybe like a little more intensive. Um, the first thing, we just asked really simple questions throughout the study, particularly at the end of our interview with the participant, asking them to reflect on our research. Because we recruited these people from acute care settings, we actually were able to use our study as an example of what did you think about this experience? Like, is there anything we should change for other participants? And I think this is a pretty valuable lesson for all researchers. Your participants are ultimately the people who are receiving the study, like in its full, not a mock study. This is like a real deal of a study. And you think that they have the most, they can give you the most candid, realistic feedback about how your study actually is playing out. And I think we kind of forget to just ask them once in a while, what do you think about, like, did this study work for you? And I think you can get some really good ideas from your participants about um, just improving, whether it's like small things, like maybe just like, hey, I'd like to be reached out at a later point. I'd like you to ask that earlier, things to ask during this process. But it's just I think it's pretty simple to put in, and I think you get some really good advice this way. The second strategy we used, we leveraged the Community Advisors on Research Design and Strategies cards, which if you're not familiar with cards, they're with the Wisconsin Network for Research Support winners, and in the School of Nursing here, and they're super helpful at giving you. There are community members in Madison that give you um, really good advice on how to change your recruitment materials. We gave them a lot of our like recruitment materials, study materials, and kind of just asked, how do you feel about this? Does this work for participants? And they give you a lot of good advice on making it in like plain language, as like Beth went over, just kind of working on those things, but also like inclusivity and like making sure that the participants feel included. You're not like excluding people, or you're using language that is inclusive. I think it was a very good resource for that. And then finally, this was funded from an ICTR Pilot Award grant. So just a small plug for the ICTR program broadly. I think if you're interested in pursuing like a strategy like this, or like a kind of study like this, it's a very good award to pursue. And I think broadly it's really helped us with like recruitment going forward, because we did another study in the ER, and we kind of got to use like what we've learned from this here about how we can recruit and engage participants. So the next thing, I'm going to discuss a more discrete strategy called reflexive memoing. If people aren't familiar with memoing, it's a pretty pretty common tool in qualitative research. Memoing is essentially just taking notes, writing down your thoughts, interpretations, questions, anything that comes up during the research process. I like to call it an audit trail of design choices. It's basically like why are you deciding to run the study this way? How are you running it? Um, and then reflexivity goes kind of a step further. It's thinking critically about what you were doing and why, confronting and then challenging your own assumptions, and recognizing the extent to which your thoughts, actions, and decisions shape how you research and what you see. I think Gina Green Harris did a great job talking about this at the first session. And I think this is just I think this can be really valuable not only for like figuring out what you're doing and why, but just like how is the study actually working for the participant. This is an example, just an example is triangulated reflexive inquiry of like a, a process of that you could use, a prompt you could use. There's a lot of resources, a lot of different ways people use it. I would just play around with what works for you, and see, there's no real like set way to do this. It's mostly people are mostly going to give you prompts of questions. And I think they're all very helpful. But they kind of center around this like, what do I know? How do I know what I know? What is the participant? What do I think the participant feels about this experience? And usually I find myself writing these kinds of memos like shortly after an interview and just figuring out like, did that go well? Why did that not go well? Or why did it go well? What were like what were the factors that played into this process going well or not going well? And then that's something I can talk about with my study team is just like this doesn't seem to be working well. How can we figure it out? Um, and then this is just for our project, this is how we've actually been using memoing and also just an iterative process for the project. So we started on this left side with the original study materials and interview questions. And we started kind of with broad questions, asking participants their general preferences around research and recruitment. Um, they we were finding in our interviews that they were very challenging for participants to answer. They're just very broad. So we were getting a lot of answers that weren't related to the question. People were just kind of trying to grasp what they could from the question, and it was obvious there wasn't like a clear understanding of what we were trying to ask. And some participants came up to us directly and said that I just have trouble with this kind of question. It's very broad. It's not, it's not really, I'm not really sure what you're getting at with this question. So we needed a lot of prompting, redirection. Um, so we took those memos, we kind of like talked as a team and ended up doing this integration of visual tools and targeted questions. So we essentially built out more of the process of research recruitment in the hospital and the acute care setting. Um, and and also some other tools just like explaining what we mean by research, what kinds of research can you get, how do you feel about certain different kinds of research studies, just kind of getting it specifying our question a little more. And we found that these tools really helped participants understand what it is that we're talking about, and actually respond to the question the way that we intended to. um, so with the findings we had and with what we've been learning through our memos, through our interviews, we then decided that it would be a good idea to make a video depicting our recruitment steps. So we essentially, I'll show you it in a little bit, but it's essentially just detailing a researcher's approach to recruiting a patient living with dementia and a caregiver in the hospital, along with questions that we ask the um, participant at the end about like, what did you think about this approach? Did the person do a good job? And we got a lot of good feedback on like this is a good approach. And I think it was because we used a lot of what we learned previously and on what people were telling us. Um, but it really helped us get a solid foundation for like what we're asking participants. So yeah, I'm going to show you the video soon. I just wanted to tell you that it acts out 5 steps for approaching a person living with dementia. We use this with study participants, but we found that it doubles as a pretty useful training tool for other researchers to get ideas of what a recruitment approach can look like. So yeah, I will show you that now. It's about 5 minutes. I'll just show you 5 minutes of it.
Hey, Nima.
Hey.
I have a couple questions about your patient in room 10. Do you have a quick second?
Yes, I do.
Great. So I was looking at some of the notes about John's stay here at the hospital, and I think that he and his daughter Beth might be eligible for one of our research projects.
Interesting.
Yeah, this project asks people about their experiences at the hospital and then going back home,
Okay.
and about their needs and types of supports.
Okay.
So I'd love to talk to John and Beth before they go home today. Do you know if Beth is here right now?
Yeah, I think she will be here for the next few hours.
Okay, great. So I'd love to talk to them now, but I don't want to interrupt any important conversations that they might be having. Do you think it's a good time?
I was just in there. They were watching TV, but it's a good idea to check.
Okay, I agree. Since you've been taking care of them for the past few days,
Okay.
would you mind asking them if they'd like to learn more? And if they say yes, I can go in there.
Yeah, I would be happy to.
Okay,
Let's
great.
go.
Very nice.
Hi again.
Oh, hi.
Are you two still doing okay?
Yeah.
So I'm wrapping up your paper, but I'm back because there's a research project I thought you might be interested in. The team wants to learn about people's experience going back home after a hospital stay. Would you like to learn more information about it?
Well, it sounds okay to me, but Dad, what do you think?
Yeah, sure. I'd like to learn a little more about it.
So someone from the School of Nursing team is actually down the hall, and maybe she can give you more information. Would you like to talk to her right away?
Sure. Gotcha. If she long as it doesn't take too long.
Okay, I'll go grab her and make sure to keep things short and sweet.
Hi.
This is Sophie.
Hello.
This is John, and this is Beth.
Good to meet you too.
I'll let you guys chat. If you need anything, just call me.
All right, will do. Thank you, Nima.
You're welcome.
All right, my name is Sophie and I'm from the School of Nursing. I really appreciate you guys being willing to learn more about this research project today. How are you doing?
Well, a lot better. It wasn't so good when I came in, but I'm feeling a lot better now. Just sick of being in the hospital.
He's been a real trooper. It's been a rough few days, but
Boy, you
glad we're
said it.
going home now, aren't we?
Well, I'm glad things are looking up and that you can go home today. So what I'm here to do is just describe this research project. This part just takes a few minutes, and then if you are interested in learning a little bit more, I can go into some more detail. Does that sound okay?
Okay, I'd like to hear more.
Great. So our team is from the School of Nursing, and we've been working with people experiencing changes in memory and their family caregivers for a while now. And what we've learned is that being in the hospital can be really difficult, and going home can also be a challenge. So in this project, what we're doing is learning more about people's needs when they go back home and the types of supports that they use. What the project would involve is 3 different visits where we simply come talk with you, and we also will complete a couple surveys and assessments. In total, the project takes around 5 hours. What do you guys think about the project in general?
Well, it sounds really good, but my mom has been kind of bogged down with stuff at home lately.
Yeah.
And I'm still trying to work full time. So I'm
Okay.
a little worried about the time commitment. Would this study be just for Dad, or would I have to be doing it with them?
That's a great question. So this project in particular would involve both of you. And I do understand your concern with time. I know that can be really challenging.
Seems like a long time.
Yeah.
I guess I'm still interested in hearing about it, though.
Okay, great. Yeah, and I can describe some of the specific time requirements in a little more detail. What do you think, John? Would you be interested?
I'd like to hear more, yeah.
Okay, great. Do you guys mind if I take a seat while I describe a little more?
All right. Excellent. There we go. Well, thank you all for watching that. That was a lot of fun to make. Our patient actors are always blow me away every time I see that. They did such a good job. So just to recap the video, this is the 5-step process. I didn't really get into the step 5 because I think that was taken care of more by Beth a couple of weeks ago. And I think these first 4 steps are really what I wanted to focus on when it comes to recruiting and approaching participants. Because really, like, the key takeaway with all this is you can really try to take the time to learn about the participant and learn with the participant before you really get into the weeds with a study, especially if it's possible. I know not every study has the ability to go up to a nurse and ask if it's a good time to approach the participant. Um, but you can even try to figure that out with the participant themselves if you're calling them, just figuring out what times work well. Sometimes, like, this initial part where you're just talking to the participant, just giving them really basic details about, like, this is a study, this is what it entails, are you interested? This can just save you a lot of time if they're not interested, but it also gives you, like, time to build, a relationship with them. Like, you can just kind of spend more time with them, figure out more about them. And if they ultimately decide that it's not going to work for them, you don't go through the entire consent process just to figure that out. You actually kind of can end things more quickly. So yeah, I really just wanted to explain these for 4 steps. And yeah, I hope the video was helpful. So now I'm going to hand it over to Allison. I'm just gonna make sure I didn't miss any. Okay, it doesn't look like I missed any comments. But yeah, you all can give us questions at the end as well. So yeah, take it away, Allison.
All right, thanks, Clark. So I'm going to start off by giving just a brief overview of our lucidity and dementia study. Lucidity in dementia is something that happens, it's kind of a transient return of abilities. It's often communication abilities, but it's a return of those abilities when they were thought to have been lost throughout the disease process. Lucid episodes seem to occur spontaneously, and we do have a lot to learn about them. But one thing we do know is that they can have a profound impact on caregivers and influence care decisions. In short, this study aims to capture these lucid episodes on video so that we can learn more about what they look like and learn more about what caregivers have to say about them. So the study takes place on a hospice memory care unit, and our participants are people living with advanced dementia, but we also include their care partners and the clinical staff on the unit. So we're conducting these audio-visual observations on the unit, as well as interviews with the care partners and clinicians. And because the participants living with dementia can't consent for themselves, we work closely with the clinical staff on recruitment in terms of determining the appropriate timing and approach with the families. So as you can imagine, the family members whose loved ones are in the late stage of, a devastating disease, really, who are also nearing end of life, they're often grappling with anticipatory grief and exhaustion, really just a range of emotions and stressors. So obviously this can be a very sensitive time for them. So it's been really critical to communicate with participants with great care. And so one of the ways we wanted to support this careful kind of an intentional communication was building some flexibility into our study protocol. Go to the next slide. So flexibility obviously is kind of moving away from a one-size-fits-all protocol and instead building in options for participant preferences when you can. So building these in ahead of time kind of allows your communication to be inherently more participant-centered from even the very first contact. Because instead of explaining what you have to do if you enroll in this study, you can talk to them about how their preferences can really shape their participation. So I'll just share just a couple of ways we built flexibility into the lucidity protocol. So one thing we did, we're bringing a camera into this setting, and even though it's small, this can feel kind of scary or invasive to families. And so our study protocol included time windows for audiovisual observations, which really allowed for the actual cadence of observations to be determined through my conversations with the family. So the timing and pacing of observations were predetermined and not dictated by our protocol, but instead they were really up to the family. So that allowed me to be really explicit when I'm communicating with families about the power that they had in shaping their loved one's participation. Then they could feel like they're really part of the research process. And then also, it's clear then that their loved one's comfort and dignity was really a shared priority. It's a priority for us as well. Another thing we did is we offered options for how families could be kept updated on how things are going with their loved one. Some people wanted regular phone calls or emails, and other people were just happy checking in if we cross paths on the unit. But by asking for their preference, we were able to center our communication around their schedule and whatever they were comfortable with. We also offered flexibility in terms of options for locations of interviews. So they could be done in their loved one's room if they wanted, or in another private room at the study site. They could also come into our offices if they preferred. And then finally, we also built some flexibility into the consent document itself. There's check boxes at the end, and they could really, they had options on data sharing, data storage, and whether or not they wanted to receive communication after their loved one's participation had ended. So by integrating these different flexibilities into the study design, it really just allowed for the more personalized communication at all stages, really, of the research process. You can go to the next slide. So now I kind of want to shift away from the topic of study design and focus on the actual act of talking with participants. So as I mentioned, the participants and families that I'm engaging with at the lucidity study, it's an already vulnerable population at a particularly sensitive time. And I think a lot of the success that I've had in talking with participants in this study is really rooted in personalizing my communication approach, as well as being very intentional about the timing. I think my background as a hospice RN has been really helpful just because I'm really comfortable in that environment. And as a nurse, I've also developed the skill to pretty quickly read people and situations and kind of figure out how and when to engage. But you don't need to have a background similar to mine to individualize how you talk with research participants. And I don't think participants need to be particularly vulnerable in order for us to prioritize personalizing our communication. So my approach, I think, ends up being fairly simple, and it's mostly just me slowing down and really being present, because when I do that, I can make more meaningful connections with people. So it really just starts with being fully present with another person. And when you are truly present, you can listen completely and you can recognize verbal cues. You know, I might pick up on subtle signs of distress or fatigue, and that might indicate that you might need to shift your approach or communication style. People might need a break. You might need to ask if they want to reschedule. Or maybe it's as simple as just realizing that it would be good to check in with them and ask them how they're doing. But being present really, I think, can build trust and cultivate feelings of value and acceptance, self-worth too. When you commit to being present, I think just connection comes more easily, and you can build a very natural sense of rapport with people. And I would argue just to have a generally more pleasant experience. And I think it pays off in terms of research outcomes too, because people who feel respected and heard are going to be more likely to say yes to enrolling in a study and more likely to stay engaged. And then I think when a researcher is trusted, they're going to get deeper, more honest responses to interview questions. And personally, I just feel like everyone might be more content after genuine exchanges with other humans too. I want to acknowledge, though, that our roles and specific procedures might not, they might present a lot of barriers to being really present, especially if we have a lot of tasks to complete, or you're rushed, you're trying to get in another enrollment or finish the visit on time. Your job may not make being present and connecting with participants easy, but I would argue that it's worth the time and effort. So how can we intentionally create that space to be present and to build trust? Because we're typically going to need more than just good intentions, although those are important to have too. It's helpful to have a language and a practice to reference, and to be able to reference specific skills that are going to support us in being present. You can go to the next slide. So there's two frameworks that I've learned from that I think can support more present research interactions. One is the validation method, which I recently just learned about. I was attending a workshop at the Alzheimer's Association International Conference, and it was founded in the 70s, so it's been around for a while. It was originally developed for communicating with older adults who have cognitive changes. But it was pointed out early in the workshop I attended that a lot of the principles in this method really apply to communicating with anybody. The core concept of the validation methods built on acceptance and dignity, with a focus on communicating with empathy and acknowledging people's feelings and experiences as valid, even if we don't share their reality. The other framework that I think is helpful is therapeutic communication, which is really central in the field of nursing and other health professions too. So it's probably not new to most of you. But it provides us with practical verbal and nonverbal skills that are helpful in building trust and rapport and just facilitating deeper communication. So some of the central things in therapeutic communication are active listening, using reflection and rephrasing so that people know that you're hearing them, and using open-ended questions as well, and avoiding asking why, which can kind of sound accusatory at times or can be difficult to answer. So I think frameworks like these can support us in being more present and shifting some of our research interactions to being less transactional and more relational. If we do this, I think we can just more easily meet people where they are, and that'll get us closer to building trust, which is a good thing. Next slide. So I just wanted to share just a few of the things that I learned during the workshop on the validation method, as well as just some communication skills from both of the frameworks that could be helpful. So this slide reflects the foundational philosophy of the validation method. It's really just conveying the idea that you can't genuinely be present and connect with people if you aren't coming into it with this basic attitude. So that includes just respecting each person and respecting their current reality, no matter how different it is from our own. Just being honest about your role and maintaining integrity in everything we do. Setting aside the impulse to correct people or dismiss or intellectualize somebody else's feelings. And then being willing to try to feel what another person is feeling. Because when you can meet somebody's emotions with genuine feeling, you can, I think, more easily connect with them. We can go to the next slide. So how do you transition from a busy day or stress that you've got going on? How can you transition into the space where you can be present? And the validation method says that the first step is centering before you even knock on the door or go into a visit. Centering is the intentional process of clearing your own stress and feelings so you can be more open and focused and listening to other people. Because if you carry your own stress into the room, it's going to act like static and it's going to prevent genuine connection. A critical part of centering is being honest with yourself about how you're feeling. Maybe you've had a difficult day or you're running behind. You might even be dreading this particular visit with this participant for whatever reason. But the important thing is that you're honest about your feelings, you acknowledge them, accept them, but then actively try to let it go for now. You can't be present when you're consumed with your own emotions. So if you can center, you can leave that stuff outside of those interactions with other people. And it really doesn't take that long. It could just take a minute really to do this centering. And there's a variety of ways you can get there. Just mindful breathing, and then the validation method. They suggested things like centering using color and touch. So just different ways for different people, whatever resonates with people. You can go to the next slide. So the next step in the validation method is observing and calibrating. So before or during your first exchange with somebody, you have to take some time to observe the person that you're going to be communicating with. And you're looking for what's their current emotional state. Are they tense or relaxed? Or do they look withdrawn? What's their energy level? What rate are they speaking at? Are they speaking slow or fast? And the goal is to calibrate your demeanor with theirs, which is another way to meet them where they are. So if they're speaking very quiet and slow, you shouldn't burst in with high energy and rapid speech, because I think it's better to kind of gently adjust your presence to match theirs. I will add a necessary caution here that you have to use your best judgment, because calibrating may not always be appropriate. Like if somebody's agitated, you don't want to escalate by matching their agitation. Instead, you might want to match just their speed of speech, for example, to just acknowledge the urgency they might be feeling, but just maintain a calm, low tone to help de-escalate. I also want to acknowledge that the validation method was developed in long-term care facilities, and so practitioners often have a chance to observe from a distance before interacting, and could calibrate before they even entered the other person's space. And in our work, you're much more likely to have to do this on the fly in the first few exchanges with somebody. But I think as long as you're aware of the importance of doing this, that you can get there with practice. Go to the next slide. So I just have a few specific, fairly simple communication skills that we can use in the moment. They're probably all familiar to you. First one is matching, which is just kind of like ongoing calibration, just to build rapport. Using rephrasing and reflection, just kind of repeating a keyword or summarizing a phrase that just confirms you're understanding them and listening. It's important that to have a little bit of patience and leave space for silence if appropriate. I know that can feel awkward, but it's okay to have a little silence from time to time. And then assuming you're working with adults, you want to maintain an adult to adult tone, especially if you're interacting with any vulnerable population, older adults or those with cognitive changes. You want to avoid like a sing-songy tone or anything that might sound condescending, because those things can really shut down a sense of connection. Then I think in the video we saw kind of thinking about physical positioning, getting on the same level as somebody. If they're sitting down, you want to take a seat too. You don't want to hover over people. And then both like eye contact and personal space, just being able to observe the other person and understand if they're giving you cues that they're not comfortable with something. So if somebody's leaning back or pulling away, you're probably too close. If they're looking away constantly, you might be making a little bit too much eye contact. So those are just some things to think about. And I apologize if they're too simplistic, but hopefully they're helpful. And then I think our next slide is just kind of the key takeaways from both what Clark shared and what I shared. And at this point, we would be happy to take any questions or comments that anybody has. Silence. That thing I said that was okay to have, having it.
I'm trying to wait people out here. I have a question, but I'll wait a bit longer. Okay, I will go. I can only handle so much silence. And that was the extent of my ability. Thank you so much for this talk. I really appreciated it. And Alison, I just really felt it when you were acknowledging things like situations where maybe you've been dreading approaching someone. I think a lot of us have felt that, and it's not often talked about. I was wondering just sort of about the role of self-care and how I know both of you are in such charged places, making a lot of recruitment approaches, probably come away sometimes feeling a bit emotionally impacted by your work. And I'm just wondering about sort of self-care on a personal level, and then also what you can do as a team to take care of each other doing this work?
That's a great question. I think so. I'll answer the last part first. We've had, we're doing this study with people who are in hospice. So usually the end of their participation in the study is the fact that they have passed away. And that can be hard even for people that aren't on site, because we have team members who screen our videos. We're looking for those lucid episodes. And over time, people become attached to our participants. So we've taken time at meetings just to kind of acknowledge people and give people a chance to talk. That's been helpful. And then in terms of self-care for myself, I think so some of these methods, like the validation method, like being present with other people, like it does consume your energy. It's not an easy thing to be doing. So acknowledging that you can't always be doing that, and that you have to turn it on and turn it off. And then, there's been a few times where things have gotten maybe a little bit more challenging than the baseline. And at those times, it's okay to just take a break, go for a walk, or maybe you have to take half a day or something as a mental health time. But it's important to acknowledge it so that you can get back and keep doing the work.
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. And I don't think I really have much more to add to what Allison mentioned, but that I do think the culture of the who you're working with helps immensely with that. Just not having a judgment-free coworkers. I'm very fortunate to work with people like Allison, who I know I can reflect on these kinds of things. And I think for me, I think like what Allison said about you can't control every interaction. It kind of it resonates the more interactions you have with participants. Like sometimes it's just like you can't always take everything personally. Like people are going to sometimes just not be, in the mood for it. And it's like I think it's kind of comes with understanding where your participants are at too. It's like this is a person in our case, in both of our cases, it's like they're in challenging situations, and it's like I think they have bigger fish to fry. Um I think we just kind of have to um recognize. For me, it's just helpful to recognize that and kind of like let it pass through you like a sieve rather than soak it up like a sponge.
Anyone else has a question, or else Anne and I have one more as well. Okay, I'll just ask it. So yeah, your team is definitely doing so much important work in this area. Is there anything that you're struggling with in terms of communicating with study participants that you'd like input on? Perhaps maybe any attendees can chime in or throw something in the chat in response, or tips that they like to share.
Yeah, I can, because I think we talked about this earlier. The things, a major thing we haven't really found a silver bullet for, which I think is just because it's a very complicated issue, is kind of navigating relationships. A lot of our work is with, patients living with dementia, and then as well as their caregivers. And I think sometimes it's you find if it's not complicated enough to like talk to one person and understand where that one person's coming from, it's just a whole nother factor to then navigate people's relationships with their loved ones. And I think, for example, um when we consent people living with dementia off, and their care partners or who, family members are always present during that, it's sometimes hard to gauge if the participant is adequately like interested in the study, if they actually want to participate. Sometimes it's hard to gauge if they even have like the capacity to consent just because the family member is answering questions for them. So that's one area. I know it's a pretty challenging area, but I don't know if anyone else has experience in this with this kind of dynamic, and if there's any strategies people have used to help manage it.
Clark, would it be okay if folks need to mull this one over a bit, if they can reach
Oh,
out to you directly too, if they have
totally fine. I know it's
experience?
it's not an easy ask.
Does anyone else have questions for Alison or Clark? She's got a couple minutes left here.
This is Mary Elizabeth. I just wanted to say this was an amazing presentation, and the work you do is it's tricky and it's really amazing. And I thought it was so good that Allison, that you mentioned that, it's if you need to take time, go for a walk, take a break, because sometimes it can be very, very challenging. So thank you both so much for doing this today. Greatly appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mary.
You're welcome.
Christine, thank you. It's a sweet comment in the chat. And I wish both of you could accompany a lot of us on our recruitment visits to coach us through. Great. Well, thank you so much, everyone. Glad we were able to have some discussion time at the end here. And please, it sounds like Clark and Allison are very open to inquiries or follow-up discussion on this via email.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
All.